Well, to discuss this, I'm joined in La Jolla, California by Harry Litman. He's a former U.S. Deputy Assistant Attorney General, and in Washington, D.C. is Republican strategist and the president of the conservative Hispanic Leadership Council, Ivan Garcia-Hidalgo. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us on the Newsmakers. Harry, let me start with you. So, special counsel's investigation did not establish collusion. Are you disappointed?
Well, no. I mean, I'm a prosecutor, so you're always looking for the truth. You know, it was clearly a righteous or a justified investigation. There were a lot of unusual points of connection between Russia and the United States. There's still the pending counterintelligence investigation to try to get to the bottom of the president's possible alliances or even compromise with Russia. It was something that certainly needed to be tracked down. And of course, we don't even know what the basis is for saying that he couldn't bring charges. It might be fairly technical, but I think it's something that the country obviously very much needed, and it would have been derelict to have not pursued it to the end.
And Harry, when someone like Adam Schiff, the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, had said clearly, I think there's plenty of evidence of collusion and conspiracy in plain sight, he looks a bit foolish now, doesn't he?
No, I certainly would not say that. I mean, let's take a step back and look at everything we've been seeing in plain sight over the last 18 months. We have these very unusual encounters in the Seychelles Islands. We have the campaign manager passing on secret proprietary data and leaving by a separate door to a Russian operative. We have the campaign members saying, yes, bring it on, give us Hillary Clinton's dirt, and we love it. That is clearly evidence of collusion. That has to be distinguished between a finding by a prosecutor, which is a high standard. I've done it, you know, I did it myself for many years, that they could prove intent beyond a reasonable doubt. But the idea that there is what isn't evidence of collusion is spurious. Of course, there was and is and was a matter of concern. So Schiff needn't be embarrassed at all.
Okay, so Ivan, there was evidence, just not enough that could be proved beyond a reasonable doubt. Do you accept that, Ivan?
No, absolutely. There was absolutely no evidence. This was nothing more than a witch hunt. It comes down to the following: is Democrats were more concerned about which bathroom to use. They came up with a pathetic candidate, a pathetic strategy. They got their ass kicked in the election in 2016. They couldn't handle it. They're still crying about it. And they created this ghost and this story about collusion. The only situation here, the only collusion is what happened, like Senator Lindsey Graham said yesterday, and everybody in the media should be absolutely embarrassed, and they're a disgrace. The Pulitzer Prize should be pulled for the New York Times and the Washington Post. CNN, MSNBC, and the rest of those radical organizations need to reevaluate. And that's why their ratings are piss poor. You look at CNN, they have a credibility rating of 19%. MSNBC and others around 14. Washington Post and New York Times are a joke. You know, you look at that situation, and that's really what it comes down to. They lost. They have no credibility. They had no strategy, and that's all they're pushing. There's Russian collusion garbage, and now that it's out, they've been saying for 2 years that once the Mueller report is out, now it's out, now you have people like this guy coming on here and on other channels saying that no, there is no clarity, the president's not exonerated.
Who was it a witch hunt?
That is pathetic. They're absolutely sore losers. Who was conducting the witch hunt? And they're going to lose again in 2020.
Ivan, who was conducting the witch hunt? Who was conducting the witch hunt?
What do you mean, who was conducting it?
Well, I mean, okay, you say it's a witch hunt. Who's doing it?
Have you been in like a time capsule or something, or what?
Who's doing the witch hunt? If you say there's a witch hunt, who was doing it? Who was going after the president?
It was all created. It was all created by people in the Obama administration. Look at the situation with McCabe. Look at Comey. Look at Peter Strzok. Look at Lisa Page. Look at the Christopher Steele dossier. What are you talking about?
So Ivan is displaying a shocking.
Those are the things that now are gonna. Those are the things that now are gonna be looked at, that have been swept under the table for 2.5 years. This Russian crap started under the Obama administration What did he do about it? Nothing.
Okay, let's ask Harry Lippmann.
He tried to take
Let me
over.
just briefly respond.
Ivan, give me a second here. Ivan, give me a second, right? Okay, so
Ivan,
Harry.
may I briefly respond?
Okay, so Harry, you can respond with
just a
this.
quick response to that.
Okay,
Yes,
so
I'm sorry,
Harry,
go
respond, but also respond to
Okay.
the fact that the president feels completely vindicated and feels completely exonerated, even though that's not exactly what came out. The president said no collusion, no obstruction, complete and total exoneration, keep America great. That's what he tweeted, even though the text of it didn't say complete exoneration, but park that off. Respond to Ivan and respond to the president, who feel vindicated that this was a witch hunt, there was nothing in it, and now you guys have been exposed, whoever you guys are.
Sure. I mean, Ivan just went off on a great detour and frolic about political considerations, etc. He just has a shocking ignorance of how the legal system works. This so-called witch hunt was initiated by a Republican with the appointment of another Republican who is understood throughout the country to be the finest prosecutor of his day. He's made conclusions but hasn't addressed at all, of course, the wealth of evidence that he did go through. And lucky for him that Robert Mueller is a very honorable, straight up man. But the notion that it's somehow a Democratic plant is absurd on its face. In terms of Trump, this is his kind of braggadocio. He has been this way from the start, but of course it's a very tepid, clean bill of health to say doesn't quite reach the level of criminal conduct, and even more so on the obstruction side, where not only did Mueller not exonerate him, he said specifically, I do not exonerate him. And we do not know the reason that he declined to find there was criminal conduct, even there beyond a reasonable doubt. That's something we're going to need to know. It's not this political crass, excuse me, Ivan, it's not this political crass mud battle. It's something of grave concern for the country that's important to know the truth of. And if you just close your eyes and see it as a Democratic witch hunt, you'll be disserving the people who need to understand what happened with Russia in 2016.
Well, that's why Dershowitz and other great attorneys, lawyers, have said that Trump is absolutely 100% vindicated. The people that have been charged were process crimes. You have 675 days of investigation, 19 lawyers, 13 who were partisan Democrat, 40 FBI agents, forensic accountants, and thousands of subpoenas, 500 witnesses, etc.
Is it your view that the investigation should not have occurred?
With a $25 million price tag, all because you lost an election.
Yeah.
All because you lost an election. That is pathetic. It is sad. Look what
Ivan,
CNN
is it your
and the
view that
rest
the
of that
investigation should never have
everything on the
occurred?
left have been doing for 2.5 years. They've been running around saying mountains of evidence. There is collusion. Every single second you would turn on CNN or one of those jokes, and they would say, breaking news, the latest from the Russian investigation, the latest on the Mueller report. All these bogus stories, Pulitzer Prize for the New York Times and Washington Post with amazing coverage. Where are they now? Egg on their face. They're a joke. They're an absolute joke. And that is reality.
Is it your view that the investigation should never have occurred?
Harry, I think he's made it clear.
Okay. All
right, Ivan. Okay, so Harry, I think he's made it clear that he believes that all of that was a waste of time. I want you to address one more thing for me, Harry. But first, I want to swap out Ivan. Ivan.
Sure.
I thank you very much for joining us here on the Newsmakers. We're going to do a little switch now.
Thank you, Ivan.
Pleasure having you back on the program.
Okay.
Thank you, Harry. Good meeting you.
Tag team.
Let's thank him. Let's bring in Paul Rosens, who was a Deputy Assistant Secretary for Policy at the Department of Homeland Security. Harry, I'm going to get your response in a second, but I want to ask Paul a question straight out the gate first. Paul, has justice been served? Does this make sense? When you read the line, the special counsel states that while this report does not conclude that the president committed a crime, it also does not exonerate him. Because a lot of people find it sort of wishy-washy, and Trump feels exonerated, and as we heard from Ivan, they see it as a victory. How do you feel about it, Paul?
I think I'm closer to where Harry is on this. I think it is a good thing that the process has worked. I think that it is wholly appropriate to have conducted an investigation into allegations of Russian interference into the American 2016 election. I think what's lost in some of what you've been talking about is the fact that other aspects of Mueller's investigation have confirmed what we all suspected, which is that the Russians did, in fact, engage in significant efforts to interfere with the American election, most specifically through social media campaigns and through crimes, through cyber hacking of the Democratic National Committee. Now, that's worth knowing, if only because that gives us something to work on to fix, to make sure that it doesn't happen again. Right. I am also pleased, actually, to learn that there was insufficient evidence to prove that the president is a co-conspirator with the Russian government. That should have been the bottom line of what we wanted to hear, and I'm glad to hear that the president is innocent of being a Russian agent.
Right. A lot of people are so upset.
That doesn't mean that he's a great president.
In the culture wars in the U.S., a lot of people on the other side of the fence are so upset that there's no proof that their president is a Russian agent, which, as an outsider, I find completely fascinating. Harry, I want you to address a point that was made by Ivan, because he said, all those people who went to jail, we've got this beautiful video wall behind me with, the 7 or so people who went to jail over this period of 2 years, the Manaforts and the Papadopouloses and the Cohens who faced the music. Ivan said those were process crimes. They're not necessarily connected to the president or the fact that there's evidence of collusion. So naturally people go, why did all those people go to jail if everything was kosher? But is it a fair argument to say those were just process crimes?
Thank you. No, I mean, I think it's unfair in a lot of ways. First, these so-called process crimes are extremely usual in a large investigation of this sort, where you work your way up. But here, it's bigger than that. First, there are many crimes that are not process crimes of tax fraud and bank fraud and the like. But we have this continuing question. We have Michael Flynn and Paul Manafort, and yes, the President of the United States and others who were continually lying about both in public and to Congress and to the special prosecutor about the events with Russia. Why is that? If everything was completely clean and there was no connections with Russia, we still have a need to answer
if they lied
question.
that much, Harry, sorry to interrupt you, and I apologize, Harry. If they lied that much, wouldn't it have been so easy for Mueller to say, yes, there was obstruction because they lied, but he did not draw a conclusion? Why do you think he still hung a big question mark over that?
Okay, so 2 points. First, I mean, it's not just enough to lie for obstruction. There's certain intent and the like. But you pose a great question. To me, it's the $64,000 question that now remains. It's so unusual that a prosecutor would go all the way and then not make a judgment. We really need to determine why. If he did it based on evidence, it's one thing. If he did it based on policy, it's another. And basically, it's not wishy-washy yet. It's a question mark. We don't know exactly what Mueller concluded and why he concluded it. It's important to know.
And taking that a step further, Paul, should this be made public for the American people and everybody else to go through properly and decide for themselves?
Well, I think most of the report can and will be made public going forward. There is no reason to think that Attorney General Barr is going to conceal more of it than is necessary. We have certain rules about grand jury secrecy, for example, that will probably be honored. But I'm expecting that a large fraction of this, including, most importantly, as Harry has noted, Mr. Mueller's analysis of why it is he chose not to do the obstruction charges, will be made public, and that'll be for the American public to kind of examine for themselves and form their own judgment, especially with respect to whether or not that calls into question the president's conduct in office, even if it's not criminal.
Right. So, Harry, grand jury information, fine, that can be redacted, but you want to read everything, don't you?
I mean, yes, one would like to. In Watergate, you did. It's a tough kind of balance in the law. You have a very strong public interest here, but then you have the interest of the uncharged people in the grand jury. There's the ability for a court to pass it on to Congress, but it's a tough calculus. In Watergate, it was a little bit easier. There were no really interests left except the president, Nixon, who said send it over. Here, there are probably others. It's going to be a tough calculation and a legal battle.
Yeah, there are those who say, on, I guess, the red side of the aisle, or those who support Trump the most, who say no further indictments, time to move on. And then there are others, including, well, the president, Paul, who has suggested things like, well, we need to investigate the investigators. This is an outrage. This has been a waste of time. Is he being bombastic or is he serious? Like, are we possibly going to see some attempt at punishment from the White House and the Trump administration at those who dared go after Trump?
As a political matter, I think that the president is one of those who always attempts to punish his political enemies. So we're likely to see that. As a matter of law, I think it is really very unlikely that the Department of Justice will open up a significant investigation of Hillary Clinton or the FBI agents. They don't want to go back to that any more than most of the rest of the country does. I'm sure your earlier guest, Ivan, would love to go back and keep refighting the 2016 election for the rest of his life, but most people don't want to do that.
Okay, Harry, do you expect a counterattack from Trump?
I agree completely with Paul. I expect a political counterattack. I expect talking points. I expect a rallying of the base, but there's no legal basis, and I don't expect any kind of Department of Justice inquiry by Bill Barr or anyone else.
Okay, gentlemen, it's been really good talking to all of you. Harry Lippmann, Paul Rosens, and earlier Ivan Garcia-Hidalgo.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much. See you again.
Thank you very much.